Hello there, and welcome to a new video for Age of Wonders 4. In this one I got 10 advanced tips and tricks for your Mystic culture. I'm going to go deep into what makes these guys awesome and what you can do to get the most out of your culture. So let's get started with number 1. I want to talk about Astral Echoes first, because they are one cultural trait that you're playing with, and they're really good. But what's behind it except for your scouts collect that stuff? So first of all, it's quite obvious you gain mana or knowledge out of these. You also see a counter here, how many you got of these, and most importantly, the author of the Old Seers transforms these into a brutal income of knowledge and mana. Therefore, you want as many as you can of these. To make matters a little bit more complicated though, other Mystic rulers will compete with you in this regard. So that means, surprisingly enough, you need a lot of scouts for this culture, because at the beginning of the game you want to find out two things. For one, am I the only Mystic ruler? And B, where is another Mystic ruler if so? So at the end of the day, it ends all with you sending out a lot of Mystic projections because you don't want to lose that arms race. The Astral Echoes are so powerful, since once you have the Altar of the Old Seers, only buildable once in your empire, you have so much benefit out of these, and yeah, this is really big. So don't sleep on that. Churn out as many scouts as you can early on. It's surprisingly important with the Mystic culture, because this is your backbone for the mid and late game to come. So number 2, I will go into the Soother and why he is really important for your culture, and why you should always have at least one of these guys on your banners. So, or on your army. The Soothing Breeze is very obviously a pretty decent healing spell, but this is not the major sales point of your Soother. The spell channeling is. 20% cheaper spells are so tailored into the character of this faction that you really should have at least one of these guys in your army, so you can utilize that. It doesn't stack, so you don't need more of these if you want to go for better supporters. You don't need more than one, but all in all, it's really a loss to skip on these. If you happen to have other supporters and you think, nah, I don't need those, bring at least one for the cheaper spells. Surprisingly enough, it does synergize with gifted casters, so you can end up with really cheap spells this way. Number 3, let's talk about swarming. The Mystic culture is surprisingly well fit for this job. They got access to really powerful throwaway units. The Arcane Guards are polearms. That means they get always to retaliate due to their charge resistance. They have the first strike, so they will hit before the enemy does, and they can be pimped up naturally with the Star Blades. If you now add in some slight steroid damage-wise, you have one hell of a throwaway unit where you can just pay no attention if they die, because they are so darn fast retrained. On top of that, you got the Arcanists. They are nothing special, they are just your standard ranged unit, but as they are also upgradable with Star Blades, and since you want to cast spells every turn, you have already a lot of damage on the tier 1 roster alone. Once you hit tier 2 as well, the Soother and the Spell Shield complement your natural roster oh so well. The Spell Shields come with a point-blank stun AoE, which is fitting into your swarming role exactly as well, so you can disable parts of the enemy army, so you can focus out single parts, and they are also quite fairly defensively powerful, so they're really good for a tier 2 unit, and again, their damage will be increased by the Star Blades. And Soother, well, we already skimmed him. The heals never hurt when you have a front line that depends on retaliating and just standing there and being swarmed. Really good stuff. You can easily put that into a very powerful spot just with tier 1 and tier 2 units alone. Summons work as well. Work very well too. The tier 1 and tier 2 summons out of the early books, I mean. Okay, let's talk about number 4, and that's your focus into summoning. So, not only do you have one impressive mana income with this faction alone, due to the Astral Echoes, and you also get natural access to a special province providing mana. So you really have a good wallet for mana alone. But it doesn't end there. We also have access to the Spellbreakers. These guys deal double damage to magic origin units. That means you are really well fit to host your own magic units and destroy the enemy magic units a lot easier. So this altogether makes them a very, very good fit to bring in magic origin units. The Empire development skills that you have in the Astral area are not so much for the summons, but they also complement your combat casting, so you have more mana available for magic origin units. And later down the road, we do have, wait a sec here, a reflux, and here this one. We gain a bonus for our magic origin units, and if you splice into Shadow, you also can get massive cost reductions. So Shadow and Astral go really well if you want to go for the summoning tree, and either way you're really well fit to bolster your armies with summoned units more than other cultures ever will be. Number 5. We've been talking about the mana that we get, but there's one thing that you should totally pay attention to. Your buildings, they give you mana, but you don't have any other advantage in the knowledge department. Your big things where your knowledge is good at is due to the Altar of the All-Seers. There you get a lot of income. The Astral Echoes can give you a knowledge income, and you can boost a little bit of a knowledge income with conduits or research posts at the Mystic Abbey, but that's it. Behind that, you are pretty average on the research in, so help yourself to more research posts, to more buildings in that department. You just should really pay attention to the fact that you have high quality spells on top of your huge resources, because this is really important. You have no natural big bonus to research, not bigger than other people. Mana is the big sales point of the mystic culture, not knowledge per se. But you can really crank up the knowledge income quite easily, don't get me wrong there. So let's get into number 6. I want to talk about how heavy on battle mages your roster is. You have, after all, 2 native battle mages. That's more than any other culture. And what you can do with that. The fun part about battle mages is a lot of their enchantments are applicable to supporters as well. And this is pretty fun. So, for example, your Frenzying Focus is going for battle mages and supporters, and most unit enchantments that enhance the damage of battle mages also enhance the damage of supporters at the same time. This means with the mystic culture you are very, very compatible to other supporter units, because the fun part is if you modify the damage part of your battle mages, you automatically upgrade the damage part of your supporters. That means your supporters are not only utility, they all of a sudden become actually quite decent at dealing damage. They will be never as good as Battle Mage in terms of dealing damage, but they have the advantage of bringing utility and damage all of a sudden. And this is very unique to the Mystic culture, because at the end of the day, since you have so many Battle Mages in your native roster, you will bring in one or another unit enchantment most of the time, to boost up these guys. So it never hurts to have an eye out on useful support units either, because they benefit passively off of that, and I've made the experience that this makes my armies go really bonkers. Number 7. We have a lot of problems, though, when it comes down to the physical department. We don't have any ranged physical attacker. We don't have any archer unit. So it does pay off from time to time to opt into a external source of ranged damage. It is not that important, but it can help out a lot. I just want to stress out that physical damage is also a problem of yours, since your units are not particularly resilient against it. You also have no native abilities to increase your resistance against physical damage whatsoever, so this is kind of like your weakness. Your spell shields are literally the most tanky thing in your roster, and they can also get flanked, and that robs them already 3 points of defense. What does that mean for you? It's important for you, therefore, that you either brace yourself against physical damage in form of tome units, for example, or see what you can do in terms of enchantments and those things. And you should consider bringing in some extra boost up in terms of physical damage for your melee units, because you end up with a lot of elemental damage. Starblades adds that into, and most unit enchantments that buff up damage add in some sort of elemental damage again. So your entire profile can easily be dismantled with high resistances against magical damage. Luckily, you got spell breakers available. Their Star Purge also lets the enemy lose all positive status effects, so keep an eye out. If the enemy is boosting their resistances too much, you can also counteract it with that, but be aware of that weakness and play around it accordingly. It all depends on what kind of enemy you're facing, after all. Sometimes it doesn't matter at all, your lack of physical damage. I mean, sometimes it can be really, really bad for you. Just keep an eye out on it. Number 8. The other Mystic Rulers are the worst thing that can happen to you. Literally, there's, for me, almost no thing as bad as another Mystic Ruler, especially when he's close to me. Several reasons for that. We have already seen that we will compete against the Astral Echoes. That's one thing. But the other thing is, since we want to usually rely on buffing, summoning units, and all those things, and the enemy has access to these guys as well. So that means if the enemy is Mystic, and you're playing your typical Mystic gameplay, surprisingly, the other Mystics are really good at spitting into your cereal. So, that's something you should really pay attention to, and if you happen to see another Mystic Ruler out there, he is basically the biggest competition for you, alongside with maybe other people with high physical or magical resistances, but I ended up despising the other mystical rulers the most whenever I played the Mystics. So it's kind of like a Highlander thing. There can't be only one, and every other Mystic ruler makes the game harder for you. So that's one weird downside of these guys. So, number 9. Let's talk about Townhalls. There is one really particularly interesting thing about the Mystic culture, and that's about their tier 4 Townhalls. They give you world map casting points and combat casting points. That's a fairly unique trait that I haven't seen on any other Town Hall. Most tier 4 Townhalls not even give you anything behind those 3 lines up here, and this makes it really, really interesting, because that means you are darned hungry for gold with these guys. You see, you want to build that altar of the old seers. Sure, it's only 280 gold, but here you have 800 gold. You want to build high quality things all the time, so you want to have that Wizard's Auditorium, for example, on every city. So I realized the longer I played these guys, I noticed a really, really deep hunger for gold for these guys, higher than with other cultures, especially since I personally think this is a massive upgrade, and you can build that in every city, you know? So, just as a side note, don't sleep on these. They upgrade your combat potential and your map casting potential by a lot. So, number 10, the last thing I want to talk about, Spelljammers. So, Spelljammers are your worst enemy when you're trying to conquer the enemy area. Unlike other cultures, you totally tend to rely on your spellcasting in combat. So when you are attacking the enemy premises, if we don't have any on the any Spelljammers visible, you should really, really, really scout out the enemy area and pillage at least that Spelljammer, because if it is still present, you cannot cast spells during the battle, and this will be a major disadvantage. Hell, your entire roster depends on you being able to cast spells. Oh, wrong unit, sorry. Because otherwise your Starblades won't proc. And, you know, that Starblades thing is totally your, where are my hobbies? Is totally important for you. Ah, here they are. So, I'm gonna make it. Promise. Yeah. So, without casting spells during a combat, you won't activate any Starblades. So, Spelljammers, they're really much worse for you than for most cultures. But I mean, in general, you want to remove that thing always. But just keep an eye out for it, because I figured for the Mystic culture, it is really massively important. Okay, so that's been that. There's of course more to say than just 10 things about the mystic culture, so feel free to let me know what you guys want to add into this video. Feel free to leave a thumbs up and consider subscribing. I'd be delighted if you did so. There's also a playlist link down there leading to all the other Age of Wonders 4 info videos I made, and I'd be delighted if you'd give it a go. So, have a wonderful day, and see you next time.